Hi students, welcome to the BYJU'S Hindu News Analysis for 13th of December 2018. So we have a small announcement for you. So many students have been asking for the lecture content, how to read, where to get the material from. So all your queries are answered now. All that you have to do is visit our website, and we the BYJU'S are the one-stop destination for your civil service preparation, and we have everything that you need, from the daily news analysis, which we call as the comprehensive news analysis, the PIB extract, the Rajya Sabha TV debates, the EPW, the Yojana, the Kurukshetra, and all this from the multiple websites will be extracted and will also be given into the magazine. So let's get started and look into the first article. So the first article says Supreme Court extends time for the NRC claims. So this article is speaking about the National Register of Citizens. So previously in the number of CNA classes on the YouTube, we have discussed about the National Register of Citizens, what is it and what are the possible implications. What you can also do is there is something called as the IAN section on our website, and this IAN section is the issue in news, which will give you a complete picture of what this article is all about. So what I would suggest is go to our website and click on the issue in news, and this will give you a complete picture of this National Register of Citizens. But in relevance to this article, what the Supreme Court has done is it has extended the deadline for the submission of the claims and objections for inclusion. So it has extended the timeline from December 15th to December 31, 2018. So what this will help is that people would be able to verify about the authenticity of this NRC, and they'll be able to make certain inclusions as well as exclusions. So in order to give precedence to this, what the court has further directed is that the copies of draft NRC be made available for inspection at convenient locations. So people would be able to visualize this NRC, they would be able to go through this NRC, and in case they have certain objections for the inclusion as well as exclusion, they would be able to go up to this convenient location or the setup that the Supreme Court has asked the state government to allocate, and then they'll be able to make suitable changes accordingly. So this is what we need to understand in reference to this article. So moving on, let's look into the next article. So the next article says India gets submarine rescue system. So what is this article all about? So this is speaking about the deep submergence rescue vehicle. So kindly remember, this deep submergence rescue vehicle is important from your GS3 perspective, and that is to do with the defense. So what happens of late is submarine is very important when it comes to the national security, but at times what happens is the functioning of the submarine gets clogged up, there is disturbance, and sometimes the functioning of the submarine gets disabled. However, what you will see is number of people who are there within the submarine can lose their lives, and in order to overcome this issue, in order to make sure that we are saving the life of our soldiers, the Indian Navy has come up with one of the moves, and that is called as the deep submergence rescue vehicle. So what is this basically? It is nothing but it will rescue the crew members who are stranded within the submarines that are just got deactivated or disabled due to some technical glitches. So what this deep submergence rescue vehicle will have is it will have a decompression chamber that can accommodate the submariners, as well as it will have a remotely operated vehicle which can be used to beam the images as well as provide immediate assistance to all these people. So this DSRV that we are speaking about can also be transported by air, enabling it to conduct rescue operations across the globe as well. So with this incorporation, what India has achieved is it has become one of those countries which has this capacity to make sure that the submarine crew are also saved. So we will have to understand certain facts when it comes to this deep submergence rescue vehicle. So what it says is that it will be able to operate at a maximum depth of about 650 meters, and it has an endurance time of about 12 to 8 hours. The total capacity of this deep submergence rescue vehicle is 17. So it will have 3 crew members who will be taking care of this. So it will be able to make sure that it is at any point able to save about 14 people. So all in all, it has a compartmentalization of 17, where 3 will be the crew members themselves, but there is another 14 which it is able to save within the submarine. So it has an approximate cost of about 1000 crore of one system. So this is what we need to understand in reference reference to this article. So moving on, let's look into the next article. So the next article says end IPS hegemony in the CRPF panel. So what is the context here? So there was one of the parliamentary panel which was actually looking into the functionalities of the Home Ministry, and it has given certain recommendations in reference to the appointment of the IPS as the heads in the Central Armed Police Forces as well as the working hours of the CRPF. So what this article goes on to say is it wants certain changes to be made in the way the allocation is worked with reference to the IPS officers. So what does this panel go on to say? So this panel goes on to say that instead of appointing the IPS officers as the head, why not appoint the armed forces? Because the IPS people are trained in order to make sure that their civil disturbance, in case it happens, is completely freed off. But it is the armed forces which are able to make sure that in case there is a disturbance across the borders or in the case of the internal security, they would be able to dispel it. So it is armed forces who are much better, and they have the experience and they have the expertise to make sure that there is conflict which can be resolved. But the IPS people who are currently heading the Central Armed Police Forces are not suitably equipped. So what they go on to say is the nature of the Central Armed Police Forces are more similar to that of the armed forces, and it would make sense that we have more officers from the armed forces rather than from the IPS section. So what this article further goes on to say is that the government needs to re-examine this particular rule that has been laid in the IPS cadre rules of 1954. So what does this particular section 6 of the IPS cadre rule says? It basically means that you are employing certain people from the State Department to the Central Department. So when the State Department, you have the IPS officers who are working in the state cadre, so the center will be picking up certain IPS people on deputation to work in the central government. So this basically, that is rule 6 of the IPS cadre rules of 1954, basically goes on to say that there are few IPS who will be recruited, they'll be posted on deputation for a central government work. So what the panel goes on to say is this has to stop. Why? Because majority of the Central Armed Police Forces, currently when you look into the Central Armed Police Forces, right, let's take for example the CRPF, the CISF, the BSF, the ITBP, the SSB as well as the NSG are 100% reserved for the IPS officers. That is the highest echelons, the hierarchy which is headed, that is the DG, the Directorate General, are all headed by the IPS officers. So what this panel goes on to say is kindly review this particular section of rule 6 of the IPS cadre rules. Why is that we are having only the IPS officers reserved for this particular role? This has to be relooked into, and other positions like the additional DG, Inspector General, the Deputy IG are all mostly reserved for the IPS officers. So kindly review this particular scheme. So what it says is even if you have this particular reservation, this should not breach the 25% order. Why? Because there are people who are already working in the Central Armed Forces. So these are the people who should be entertained, encouraged and motivated to reach the higher echelons. So when you're making sure that these officers can move up the ladder, there will be more morale, you're giving them more encouragement, and when you give more encouragement in the morale to reach that particular destiny, what these people that are already employed in the CRPF will do is they'll be motivated to work hard and work hard for the country. So what we have to do is that officers of the CRPF cadres should be given an equal opportunity to reach the topmost class, as this will bring about the boost to the morale of the CRPF, which is currently not happening because of the reservation that you are providing to the IPS in the form of rule 6 of the IPS cadres rules of 1954. And at the same time, what this article further goes on to speak is about the workload. So what does the panel suggest? Currently, when you look into all the internal security assignments, especially in the region of the Naxalite hit region, it is the CRF personnel who are deployed, and it is the CRF personnel who are deployed in the toughest internal security assignments. But the problem is these workload are reaching overboard a number of times. So they are working overtime every day without any compensation. So when you look into the Labor Act of 1948, they should be working for 6 days days for 8 hours. But what are these people doing currently? They are asked to stretch up to 12 hours, 14 hours, and sometimes without even having a weekend day off. So when you are doing all this, these people are again not compensated, and this will ultimately have a psychological as well as physical consequences. So what it has said is that yes, there are these security forces which are guarding the nation, but sometimes we will also have to understand that these are the humans which will need certain rest. So what it has gone on to suggest is, it has recommended that about 1/6 of the battalion should be at any given time mandatory training, or they should be rest, or they should be in the peace operations. Yes, we understand that these are the security personnel which the country requires, but they'll also require certain time. So come up with an objective criteria in such a way that about 1/6 of the battalion should be given rest at any point of time, is what the panel has gone on to say. So once these recommendations were made, certain explanations were also given by the Ministry of Home Affairs. So what the Ministry of Home Affairs have done is, it has said that armed forces cannot be currently employed. Why? Because the exposure or the training, that the grooming of an IPS officer matches in close with the job requirements of the senior post of the CRPF. So what it has gone on to say is, this is a civilian process. So you will have the number of people in the village sector. This the armed forces may not be able to understand. And at the same time, there is tribal heartland. So these are the people who are engaging more with the tribal heartland, and this will require interdepartmental coordination, and this will also require smooth and seamless transmission of power. So all this have been trained to the IPS officers, which the armed forces are not trained for. So what the Home Ministry has gone on to say is that IPS officers are the best suited to lead as well as provide supervisory directions to any central armed police forces in an effective, efficient and impartial manner at these particular ranking. So going ahead, in case there is any updations, we will surely look into this article as well. So let's look into the next article. It says NSG must have its own air wing. So this is a link to that particular article. So when we speak of central armed police forces, so you have 6 central armed police forces. That includes the Border Security Force, the Central Industrial Security Force, Central Reserve Police Force, Indo-Tibetan Police Force, the NSG, as well as the Sahasra Seema Bal. And what are they guarding? So we will have to look at as well the BSF at Pakistan and Bangladesh, the CISF safeguarding the PSU industries as well as public installations. The CRPF mostly is in the riot zone as well as the Naxal hit area. The Indo-Tibetan Police Force across China. The counter-terrorism anti-hijacking is taken care by the NSG, and the Sahasra Seema Bal across the Nepal, Bhutan. So kindly remember this. This can be a prospective question in your prelims examination. So what the parliamentary panel has gone on to suggest in respect to the NSG is, it has recommended that Centre urgently take steps to ensure that the national security guard, the country's premier counter-terrorist and contingency force, is equipped with its own dedicated wing. Currently, which does not have the dedicated wing, so it has gone on to recommend that you should be providing them with one dedicated wing. And we also need to know the background. So when we look into the background, the NSG was raised in the year 1986 following the assassination of former Prime Minister Indira Gandhi as well as Operation Blue Star. So the force, which is trained to operate as an elite urban terrorist anti-hijack force, does not have a cadre of its own or direct recruitment, and instead dependent on personnel sent on deputation from the army as well as the central armed police forces. So what we have to understand is that it came up in the 1986 after Indira Gandhi, the prime minister, was assassinated, and after the Blue operation. And what is the job role? It is basically into urban anti-terrorist operations, anti-hijack force, and this does not have a cadre of its own. There is no direct recruitment for this, and all the people employed in energy are recruited from different dimensions, from different departments, and that includes the army as well as those from the central armed police forces. So this is what we need to understand in reference to this article. So moving on, let's look into the next article. So in this article, it says Pakistan rejects blacklisting by the United States. So what is the context here? So USA has designated Pakistan and 9 other countries as countries of particular concern under the International Religious Freedom Act of 1998. So which are the other 9 countries? It includes China, Eritrea, Iran, Myanmar, North Korea, Pakistan, Sudan, Saudi Arabia, Tajikistan and Turkmenistan. So the first question that comes up is, what is this International Religious Freedom Act of 1998? So this is the law of the United States of America in the year 1998, and this came up in the era of Bill Clinton. So this is the foreign policy of the United States of America, where it looks into all the countries, and if there is a particular country which does not value the views of the minority, which does not respect the views of the minority, they go on to push up violations of religious freedom, such country will be falling under the International Religious Freedom Act of 1998. So in case there is a particular country which does not value the minorities' views, which does not let them practice their own religion freely, it is that country which will be falling under the countries of particular concern. So what United States of America has done is, it has put up Pakistan, China, Eritrea, Iran, Myanmar and so on other countries into this particular list of countries of particular concern. Let's take the example here. So Pakistan has certain blasphemy laws, especially when it comes to the case of Asia Bibi that we saw recently. Pakistan was not able to take care of its social disturbances, and at the same time Myanmar's mass violence against the Rohingya population, and we also see that China had imprisoned number of Uyghur people. They did not let the minorities in China, that is the Muslims, to practice their religion. They interfere with their cultural practices. So all this the United States of America has looked into and has put all these countries like China, Eritrea, Iran and other countries into this particular list. So basically, when a country is not letting that particular minority community to practice its own set of religious practices independently, then such country will be put under the countries of particular concern. There are other set of countries which are put up on the special watch list. So what is this special watch list? So this basically means they have committed certain crimes in respect to the minority community, but it is not at the scale of what is committed by other countries like China, Eritrea or Iran. So which are the countries that are put up in the special watch list? So you have countries like Russia, you have countries like Uzbekistan, Comoros. So these are the countries that are put up into this particular list. So apart from the special watch list, there is another thing called as the entities of particular concern, and this is to do with the terrorist organizations. So you have number of terrorist organizations like the Al-Nusra, the Arabian Peninsula, the Al-Qaeda, the ISIS, the Houthis. So these are the ones who are also causing disturbance and are not letting the minority practice their own religion. So as a result of this, these are the terrorist organizations which are also put onto a particular list, which is called as entities of particular nation. So what we have to understand in this particular case is, what could be the implications, what are the factors that this particular act can do to this particular country, how will the relationship be in the future. That is what is the point of importance. When a particular country is put up under the countries of particular concern, it comes up under the section 402 of the Religious Freedom Act. So it means that countries will have to make suitable changes. They'll have to protect their minorities and give them the freedom to think in the way they want and practice their faith in the way they want. However, in case the countries are not ready to do it, and in case the countries are not ready to endorse it and countries are not practicing it, then there will be enforcement of a section called as section 405. So what section 405 basically does is, it provides certain punitive actions on these particular countries. Let's take the example like cancellation of scientific or cultural exchanges, or there will be no export or import within United States of America and that country. So the public and the private institutions can deny assistance to this country. So what can also happen is, USA can go about stopping or suspending the aid to this particular country, and then there could be cancellation of the official as well as the state visits. So initially it will put this on section 402, that is countries of particular concern, and it will ask the countries to make certain changes. In case they're still not ready to listen to it, then section 405 will be enforced, and when there is section 405 enforced, this will be punitive punitive inaction. So why does United States of America had to take this up? Because it is basically to make sure that all these destinations, that is countries, are able to improve the lives of the individuals and make sure there is peace and tranquility in the society, and at the same time they should also make sure they're able to improve the respect for religious freedom. And that is why United States of America in its foreign policy has made sure this is taken up. So what is the reaction of Pakistan to this? So Pakistan on Wednesday rejected Washington's decision to place it on a blacklist of countries that violate religious freedom, branding the move politically motivated. So what Pakistan has gone on to say is this particular decision is unilateral and politically motivated. What is the credentials that they have used? So it questions the credibility and the impartiality of those people who are engaged into this particular act. And Pakistan by itself, it says, is a multi-religious country. It is pluralistic in nature and it has people from diverse faiths, denominations, and then it respects Christians, Hindus, Buddhists as well as Sikhs. So it says this is politically motivated, and it also goes on to say that it has always given equal treatment to the minorities where they are able to enjoy the human rights without any discrimination. So while all this is happening, what Pakistan has also gone on to say is that you, United States of America, will have to do a self introspection. You will have to look into the exponential rise that is seen in your country in the form of Islamophobia, and it also looks into the anti-Semitism that is happening in the United States of America. So on one side it says it is politically motivated, on the other side it asks United States of America to look into aspects of Islamophobia as well as anti-Semitism. So this is what we need to understand in reference to this article. So moving on, let's look into the next article. So the next article says RBI's excess capital should not be used to fund deficit. And what is this article all about? Here what is important is recently we saw the resignation of Urjit Patel, and we did discuss everything that is important with respect to the implications as well. In order to support this particular autonomy, the freedom and independence to the RBI, the former chief economic advisor has gone on to say is it is important to protect the Reserve Bank of India's autonomy, and there must be open technical discussions on issues in the present context. So what he has gone on to say is that in case there is an issue between the government as well as the RBI, there needs to be sorted, there needs to be deliberations and debates, and in case there are any glitches, it has to be sorted, and all this has to be within the contours of the independence of the RBI. And further what he goes on to say is even though RBI is overcapitalized, it should not be used for financing the deficit or the expenditure. Instead, the excess capital must only be used in targeted areas to solve the twin balance sheet problems as well as certain other purposes within the fold of RBI. So these are the words that are coming up from the former chief economic advisor, so it will have value to it. So kindly remember these terms so it can be used in your mains answer writing as well. So this is what we need to know in reference to this article. So moving on, let's look into the next article. So the next article says NCLT orders winding up of 13 Sardar firms. So what is of importance to us is that we understand something about the Serious Fraud Investigation Office. So the first question that pops up is what is the Serious Fraud Investigation Office? So basically this is nothing but a fraud investigating agency. So it is set up to investigate all the corruption, the fraud charges, and anything and everything in reference to a particular company. So this is related to a particular company under the Companies Act, and the most important point is the jurisdiction of the Serious Fraud Investigation Office comes under the Union Corporate Affairs Ministry. So kindly remember this can be a prospective question in your prelims examination, that the Serious Fraud Investigation Office comes under the administrative control of the Corporate Affairs Ministry. So what this Serious Fraud Investigation Office can basically do is it can look into all those frauds, the corruption charges that have been emanating in the companies under the Companies Act. So it would be able to look into or probe into by coordinating with the number of agencies like the income tax department as well as the Central Bureau of Investigation. Now the question that comes is, why was it set up? What we have to understand here is we have to go back to 2002. So in year 2002 there was large number of market scams, and you also had the failure of the NBFCs, that is the non-banking financial sector, and there were number of vanishing companies as well as the plantation companies which are cooking up. So in order to fight all this, there was one of the committees that was appointed. So it is this committee that has recommended that there needs to be one of the officers that will look into the fraud under the Companies Act. So which is this committee? It is the Naresh Chandra committee. So it is on the basis of the Naresh Chandra committee on corporate governance way back in the year 2000, because of the failure of the non-banking companies as well as the scams, that is why there was a proposal, and then we have the establishment of the Serious Fraud Investigation. So what does the Serious Fraud Investigation Office look into? Let's take for example, there is a particular fraud, it is of complex nature and it has interdepartmental and multidisciplinary ramifications, and if there is substantial involvement of public interest and there is clear improvement that can be done with respect to the fraud that has currently taken place, then SFIO will step into picture. And the most important point is, this SFIO will not be able to take up any of the cases on a suo motu basis, that is, it cannot take up a case on its own. Let's take for example the National Human Rights Commission. So it will be able to take up any cases on its own, but in here the SFIO will not be able to take up any case on its own, but only upon receiving an order from the central government it will be able to take this up. So this is what we need to understand in reference to this article. So moving on, let's look into the next article. So there are two important articles. One is to do with the new GDP back series, the other is to do with side pocketing. So both these articles, which are very important, will be dealt in your economy this week. So moving on, let's look into the next one. So it says Homebound and Citizenship. Both these articles are already explained in your earlier classes. One is to do with the Citizenship Amendment Bill, the other is to do with the extradition. So we have already explained this, there is not much of value addition. So next we have to look into these articles. So these are again political in nature, this is not much to do with the administrative purpose, so again we will not be discussing this article. So let's look into some of the prelims practice questions. So it says, which of the following countries are part of the Arctic Council? So you have Russia, Canada, USA, Denmark and Finland. So what is the correct answer for this? The answer is 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So let's look into the explanation. So the countries which are part of the Arctic Council is, you have the United States of America, Russia, Finland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Iceland, Greenland as well as Canada. So why is Denmark included? Because Greenland is part of Denmark. So moving on, let's look into the next question. So the next question says, model concession agreement recently seen in news is in reference to the PPP model. So let's look into the explanation. It says it is a form of core of the public-private partnership projects in India. So the MCA spells out the policy and regulatory framework for the implementation of the PPP project. It addresses a gamut of critical issues pertaining to the PPP framework like mitigation, unbundling of risk, allocation of risk and returns, symmetry of obligations between the principal parties, precision and predictability of cost and obligations, reduction of transaction costs as well as the termination. So let's look into the next question. It says, with reference to the eco-sensitive zones, which of the following statements are correct? So this is from the previous year question paper. So the first option says economic sensitive zones are the areas that are declared under the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, and the purpose of the declaration of eco-sensitive zones is to prohibit all kinds of human activities in those zones except agriculture. So the answer for this is neither 1 or 2, because it is not the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, it is the Environmental Protection Act of 1986, and second option is also wrong as well. So let's look into the mains answer writing. So it says the extradition treaty involves requests, objectives and drawing a plan for the future to expedite the process comment. Since we have already dealt this particular answer, what I want you guys to do is please write up this particular answer, because we have already discussed this. Put it up on the comment section so that we can add value addition from the BYJU'S team, as well as you can have a peer review amongst yourself. So kindly write all your answers on the comment section. So this is it for the day. Thank you for watching. All the best.